The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Please be seated.
A blessed day to all of you, dear brothers and sisters who are here, and also those fellow worshipers following this Mass by a live stream. Some pointers again I would like to share with you based on the first reading, as I usually do during weekdays, to consider and focus this reflection on the first reading. The experience of the people of God of exile, and later on the rebuilding, the regeneration of that people of God is characterized by what they call a more spiritual, internal regeneration, rebuilding. A new heart, no, characterized by a new heart, a recovery of hope, and the willingness to build a new Israel. But this is just only an aspect of this renewal at the time of Exodus. To God, it is not enough to engage with humanity for a new world. He wants to be with humans. Literally, to be in the midst, to dwell, to be on the side of His people, communicate with His people in an intimate way. Like during the time of the Exodus, there was this dwelling place at that time in a tent, no? Where they have the copy of the covenant of the was kept. No, that was the a special dwelling place for God in the midst of His people. Thus, God now promises that He will dwell once again in the midst of His people, as we have heard in the first reading today. But where will God dwell? What will be His house? And the prophet Ezekiel announces the reconstruction of the temple. After announcing and exalting the mysterious God, unrecognizable, invisible, Ezekiel affirms that the new temple constructed by the people is capable of welcoming the divine that is invisible and immaterial. In other words, a spirit. The very same God will be welcome in that temple. The people, having been restored in their dignity after the exile, God affirms that through the temple He will dwell forever in their midst. The dwelling of God in the midst of His people after so many betrayals is indeed something shocking affirmation of God through His prophet. God does not only liberate His people from exile, the promise is that He will be with them. He will live among them, dwell among them. He allows Himself to be approached in His temple. This God of Israel is not a God removed away from humanity. And what is the ultimate meaning of God dwelling among them, the Israelites? This becomes an urgent question, burning issue, especially in view of that experience later on of the destruction of the Temple of Jerusalem after so many centuries. So, what to think about of this now that that temple promised by God to be His dwelling is now destroyed? For us Christians, we see that certainly God, through Jesus Christ, even after the destruction of the temple, God dwells in the midst of His people. But now, it is not anymore in a physical temple. The new temple of encounter, the new temple of worship is Jesus Himself. Remember what He promised in the Gospel of John? Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will rebuild it. He was talking about His death and resurrection. And indeed, the resurrected Lord has become the new temple, the temple that served as a meeting place, as place of worship for the people of God. With Jesus Christ, He has become the new temple, the new point of encounter, the new point of worship of God has been summarized in Jesus Christ. I do not know if you have noticed, for us Christians, that at the center of our life is Jesus Christ. The Mass we celebrate, the center of which is the offering of Christ, of Himself, with this bread and wine of the Eucharist becoming His body and blood. So, it doesn't matter if you have the Temple of Jerusalem or other beautiful places or not. The point now is to have Christ in our hearts, in our lives, and we follow Him. For He is the new temple, the place of encounter, shall we say, with God. Of course, physical places, temples like what we have, for example, here, is but a sign of that vocation, calling of every one of us, the calling to enter into a loving relationship with Jesus Christ, who can bring us to the Father. He is our bridge. He is our temple. He can connect us with God. May our journey as Christians be characterized by this ongoing search for this friendship and nearness of Jesus Christ in our lives. We know very well that He is always available in every moment. Every time a Christian, a believer, opens his or her heart to Christ, to His Spirit, Jesus is there. God is there. Even in the intimacy of our rooms, in the marketplace, in the office, on our ways, in every moment, every time we open our heart to Christ, to His will, doing His will, doing what is truthful, what is good, what is honorable, there we find Jesus Christ. So it is not just a meeting that is physical, something that is physical that we need to come. Well, I'm not saying that you do not come, do not go to the church, but certainly we meet Christ every moment, every time we open our heart, our lives to Him. As I've said, the function of the gathering in the church is to remind us of our vocation, of being called to grow in our intimacy, in our friendship with Jesus Christ. May our listening of His Word in the liturgy of the Word and receiving Him in the sacrament of His body and blood, may we come really to appreciate His presence in our lives. And where Christ is, there we find the grace of happiness, of meaning, and ultimately the grace of salvation.